How does the history of Minneapolis' central neighborhood impact the way Minnesotans are responding not only to ICE, but to the killing of Renee Good? Hi, my name's Eric. I'm the host of the Biblical Justice Resources podcast, and not only am I local to Minneapolis, but the first neighborhood I lived in when I moved into the city is the neighborhood where Renee Good was killed. Now, this is the Minneapolis Central neighborhood, and as you'll see here, there's a red pin from Google, which is placed there because it's the center of the central neighborhood, which is at 34th in Portland, where Renee Good was killed. And there's history here that goes back an incredibly long amount of time. This area is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota people. It was part of the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, and in 1805, a lieutenant from the Army named Zebulon Pike negotiated for this area in a treaty with the Dakota people. Pike had been tasked with finding a location for a new fort in what was, at the time, the northwest corner of the United States, and he found a spot that he liked at the confluence of what is now the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. The problem there is that he did not actually have the authority to negotiate a treaty, and only 2 of the 6 Dakota chiefs who were present at the time signed it. But that didn't stop the U.S. Senate, who ratified the treaty and paid only $2,000 of the promised $200,000 for 100,000 acres of land here in this area. The city of Minneapolis itself sprung up around St. Anthony Falls, which is the name given to it by explorer Father Louis Hennepin. The entire industry of milling, which is why Minneapolis is known as the Mill City, sprung up because of the water power from the falls. The central neighborhood itself has been diverse, for sure by Minnesota standards, for well over 100 years, if not longer, and it's home to one of the 2 historic black neighborhoods in the city of Minneapolis. And a lot has happened in and around the neighborhood with regards to racial occurrences or race in general, diversity, all of those different things. In 1931, Arthur and Edith Lee purchased a home at 46th in Columbus, which is just to the south of the neighborhood. And when the white community discovered that a black family was moving in, they first tried to buy the house back from the family and then put a lot of physical, violent pressure on the family to move out. Within a month of their residence there was a crowd of thousands surrounding the house. So there was that threat, there was vandalism, there was the killing of their family dog, and Arthur Lee had to recruit members of his old World War I unit and fellow postmen in order to defend the house from the mob. The mob ended up dissipating after a while, and the family stayed there as long as they felt they could show that they had not been impacted by the violence, were not moving because of the violence. But when they moved in 1934, they moved north into the central neighborhood. Another recent podcast, Ghost of a Chance from the Minnesota Star-Tribune, talks about a family who ended up moving into the area as well, on this the area of the old South Side in Minneapolis. And in my opinion, you can see the absurdity of redlining based on the map that was drawn of Minneapolis because of this thin red strip that goes down 4th Avenue, showing that it was far less about the properties that were being evaluated and far more about the people who were inhabiting the properties. And there are different structural ways that this neighborhood is seen as one to be driven through rather than one to be stopped in. And one of those is Portland Avenue and her sister Park Avenue, which is 2 blocks to the east. Both of those are one-ways, Park bringing people into downtown, and then Portland, which starts at St. Anthony Falls, bringing people out of downtown, both of those terminating at 46th Street. And then, of course, we have the highway, which borders the central neighborhood to the west. Now, unlike Interstate 94, which cut directly through St. Paul's Rondo neighborhood, I-35W runs alongside the central neighborhood in Minneapolis, but it cut off and sequestered the neighborhood, and it cut off an essential black business district at 38th and 4th. And all of that has evolved the neighborhood into where it is today, which is a place that is highly populated by a diverse population, an incredible number of countries represented of immigrants from those different countries. And so perhaps it's not surprising that ICE is operating in that neighborhood, but this also isn't the only occurrence of state violence against civilians in the neighborhood. Because yes, if you notice on the map, at the southeastern corner of the central neighborhood is the intersection of 38th and Chicago, which, as we know now, is where George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police. And so all of this put together, this pushing of black and brown people into the neighborhood, this ways of seeing the neighborhood as a place to be driven through instead of stopped in, the violence that we've already seen in this neighborhood at the hands of the state. All of this put together is part of the reason why the response to Renee Good is the way it is. All of the things put together about the way ICE is treating people, all of the things put together about the way we are trying to help protect our neighbors, but also the experiences that we have actually lived through as a city. And so when I've seen people commentating on this as though it is just this incident, that's not the case. There's a lot of history here, and there's a lot of reason why people are responding the way they are. And if you want to hear more about this history, the most recent episode of the Biblical Justice Resources podcast talks about this. And if you watch on YouTube, you can actually see me walk through part of the neighborhood and get to hear the story as that happens.